Harper never imagined she'd be standing in front of a stranger, asking him to be her date to her ex-fiancé's wedding. But desperation has a way of making us brave, or crazy. When Matt, a successful CEO with eyes that seemed to understand pain, said yes without hesitation, something shifted. What started as a favor to save face turned into what neither of them expected. Because sometimes the love we're looking for finds us in the most unexpected places, disguised as a lie that becomes the truest thing we've ever lived. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and become a member for early access to upcoming stories. And if you felt it was really worth listening to, also click the Super Thanks button. Your support makes all the difference and helps us keep bringing stories that move you. The aroma of freshly ground coffee hung in the air of the small Greenwich Village cafe, mingling with the sweet scent of cinnamon from the croissants resting in the display case. Morning light streamed through the wide windows, drawing golden patterns across the worn wooden tables. Harper Bennett sat in a corner, her fingers drumming nervously on the cappuccino cup she'd barely touched. Her simple navy blue dress contrasted with the almost imperceptible tremor in her hands, a contradiction between the composure she was trying to project and the chaos she felt inside. She'd been watching the door for 15 minutes, mentally rehearsing words she knew were absurd. "Will you be my date to my ex-fiancé's wedding?" It sounded ridiculous even in her thoughts, but here she was, about to do exactly that. Harper took a deep breath, feeling the cool morning air mixed with the hot steam from her coffee. Her palms were sweating, her heart beat unevenly. When Matt Donovan walked in, the atmosphere seemed to shift. He wasn't the kind of man who went unnoticed, not from arrogance, but from the quiet presence he carried. Tall, with brown hair slightly tousled by the street wind, wearing a simple white shirt and dark jeans, he seemed out of place from the CEO image Harper had Googled the night before. His blue eyes scanned the room until they landed on her. There was a mutual recognition, despite them never having met before. "Harper?" he asked, approaching with firm but unhurried steps. "Matt." She stood, feeling her legs wobble. "Thank you for coming," he smiled. Not a corporate smile, but something genuine, almost curious. "I have to admit, your email was intriguing." They sat down. Matt ordered a black coffee, no sugar, and Harper noticed how he maintained eye contact, not intimidatingly but attentively, as if he genuinely wanted to understand who was sitting across from him. "So," Matt began, resting his elbows on the table and interlacing his fingers, "you need a date for a wedding." Harper swallowed hard. "Not just any wedding. My ex-fiancé's wedding." Silence. Matt didn't look away, didn't show judgment, just waited. "I know it sounds crazy," Harper continued, her voice trembling slightly, "but I got the invitation 3 weeks ago and I can't show up alone. I can't give him the satisfaction of seeing me broken." "Broken," Matt repeated, as if testing the weight of the word. "Is that how you feel?" The question disarmed her. Harper had expected curiosity, maybe even veiled amusement, but there was something in Matt's voice, an understanding she hadn't anticipated. "Yes," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "Marcus left me 8 months ago, said I wasn't enough, that he needed someone who matched his ambitions." She gave a bitter laugh. 3 months later, he was engaged to a corporate lawyer, someone at his level. Matt watched as Harper's fingers tightened around her cup, her knuckles turning white. He saw the pain she was trying to hide behind her straight posture and controlled tone. "And you think showing up with someone will change how you feel?" he asked, without cruelty, just honesty. Harper met his eyes. "No, but it'll give me dignity. It'll allow me to look at him and everyone who'll be there, our mutual friends, people who always thought I wasn't good enough for him, and show them I survived, even if it's a lie." Matt's coffee arrived. He thanked the waitress without taking his eyes off Harper. He took a long sip before speaking. "I'll do it." Harper blinked, surprised. "You will? Just like that? No questions?" "I have one condition," Matt said, leaning slightly forward. The distance between them shrank, and Harper could smell the subtle scent of his cologne, something woody, understated. "You need to tell me the real reason, not the story about dignity or showing you survived. The real reason. Harper felt tears threatening, but held them back. No one had asked that question. No one had cared enough to dig deeper. "Because I still feel like he was right," she confessed, her voice breaking. "That I'm not enough, that I never will be. And showing up alone would be confirming that. It would be accepting that he won. That I'm exactly the small, insignificant person he said I was." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was loaded, heavy with understanding. "He was wrong," Matt said, with a firmness that made Harper look up. "And I'll go with you. Not as a favor, but because I know exactly what it's like to carry that kind of wound, and no one should face it alone." Harper felt something loosen inside her chest. Not complete relief, but the beginning of something. A crack in the armor she'd built. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" she asked. Matt smiled, but there was sadness in that smile. "Because I've been the person who needed that kind of help and didn't have anyone. And because you're not a stranger. You're someone brave enough to ask for help. That's rarer than you think." They sat there in the middle of the cafe's morning bustle, two people united by wounds perhaps only they could understand. The pact was sealed, not with formal handshakes or contracts, but with the raw vulnerability of two hearts that recognized each other's pain. "When's the wedding?" Matt asked, taking his phone from his pocket. 3 weeks from now, on Saturday. Then we have time to rehearse." "Rehearse?" Harper frowned. Matt stood up, extending his hand. "If we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. We need a story. We need to seem real." Harper took his hand. It was warm, firm, and for the first time in months, she felt like maybe she wasn't completely alone. But as they left the cafe, neither of them realized that what had started as a charade was about to become something no script could have predicted. 3 days after the cafe meeting, Harper received a message from Matt. It was simple, direct. "Dinner tomorrow? We need to start building our story. I suggest somewhere low-key." She accepted, feeling a strange mixture of anxiety and curiosity. There was something about the way Matt had looked at her, without pity, without judgment, that left her simultaneously vulnerable and safe. The restaurant he chose was intimate, tucked away on a side street in the West Village. It wasn't pretentious, but it had an understated elegance Harper appreciated immediately. Amber lights hung from the ceiling, casting soft shadows over the marble tables. The low sound of jazz filled the spaces between other diners' conversations. The aroma of roasted garlic and red wine floated in the air, creating an atmosphere that invited confidences. Matt was already there when she arrived, seated at a corner table. He stood when he saw her, an old-fashioned gesture that surprised her. He wore a grey shirt that brought out the colour of his eyes, the sleeves casually rolled up to his forearms. "Did you find it okay?" he asked, pulling out her chair. "Yes. It's a beautiful place," Harper replied, sitting down. She'd chosen a simple, long-sleeved dress, wine-coloured, and felt strangely aware of every movement. They ordered wine, an Argentine Malbec Matt knew, and for a few minutes sat in comfortable silence, just taking in their surroundings. Matt was the one who broke the silence. "Before we start making up stories about how we met, I need to know more about you, the real person, not who you think Marcus wanted you to be." Harper felt her chest tighten. No one had made that distinction before. She took a sip of wine, feeling the warm liquid slide down her throat, giving her courage. "I'm an art teacher at a public school in Brooklyn," she began, her fingers tracing the stem of her glass. "I teach kids from 7 to 12. It's chaotic, poorly paid, and absolutely the thing I love most in the world." "Why?" Matt asked, genuinely interested. "Because when an 8-year-old paints something they feel, not what they think they should feel, they're being completely authentic. No filters, no fear of not being enough, it's pure." She paused, realizing the irony. "Something I clearly lost along the way." Matt tilted his head. "Did Marcus know how much this work means to you?" Harper laughed, but it was a joyless sound. "He tolerated it. Said it was cute that I wanted to make a difference and like it was a temporary hobby. He always expected me to switch to something more respectable. Art consulting for corporations, maybe, something he could mention at corporate dinners without feeling embarrassed." The word embarrassed hung in the air like smoke. "He made you feel ashamed of what you love," Matt said, not as a question, but as a statement. "Constantly." Harper's voice was steady now, as if she could finally name the poison she'd been swallowing for so long. When we were with his friends, lawyers, bankers, successful people, he'd introduce me as Harper, the teacher, with that tone that made it clear it was something lesser. I could see it in people's eyes, the pity, the condescension. "And you stayed," Matt observed gently. "I stayed, because I thought if I tried harder, if I became more interesting, more sophisticated, more anything, he'd finally see me, value me." Harper felt tears burning but didn't let them fall. But it was never enough. And when he broke up with me, he said I'd never be the partner he needed, that I was limited, small. The waiter brought the appetizers, burrata with roasted tomatoes, but neither of them touched their plates right away. Matt was completely focused on Harper, and she could feel the weight of that attention. It wasn't invasive, it was liberating. "Can I tell you something?" Matt said, his voice lower now, almost intimate. "Something I don't tell many people." Harper nodded, feeling the moment shift, becoming deeper. "My ex-fiancé left me 3 years ago. At the time I was building my company. I was working 16-hour days, investing every penny I had. She came from a wealthy family, used to stability, luxury. I promised that one day I'd give her that we'd be successful." He paused, his eyes distant. "But she didn't want to wait. Said I was obsessed, that I'd never be present, that she deserved someone who'd already made it." Harper felt her stomach clench. "She left you when you needed her most." "Exactly. And 6 months later, she married a Wall Street executive, someone stable, someone who could give her the life she wanted immediately." Matt took a sip of wine, the muscles in his jaw tense. "The company took off a year later. Today it's worth millions. But none of that took away the feeling that I wasn't enough, that if I'd been different, she would have stayed." The silence between them now was charged with mutual recognition. Two people who had been measured and found lacking by the people who should have loved them unconditionally. "That's why you agreed to help me," Harper said, not as a question, but as a revelation. "Because you understand. I understand more than you know." Matt extended his hand across the table, not touching hers, but close enough that Harper could feel the warmth. "And I know that showing up at that wedding won't heal the pain, but it'll give you a chance to prove to yourself, not to him, that you survived, that he didn't destroy you." Harper finally took his hand. The skin was warm, slightly rough at the fingertips, comforting. "What about you? What do you get out of this?" Matt smiled, but there was vulnerability in that smile. "Maybe the chance to prove to myself that I can still trust someone, that not every relationship is transactional, that some people are worth the risk." They ate slowly, sharing stories, not just about Marcus and Matt's ex, but about their lives. Harper talked about her childhood in the countryside, about the father who encouraged her to paint, even when everyone said art wasn't a career. Matt told her about growing up with little, about the mother who worked 2 jobs so he could go to college. With each story, the distance between them shrank. It wasn't physical attraction, at least not mainly. It was something deeper, a recognition of wounded souls who had found mutual refuge. "You know what's funny?" Harper said as dinner was ending. "I'm more comfortable with you, a stranger, than I ever was with Marcus." "Maybe because you're not trying to be someone you're not," Matt replied. "With me, you can just be you." Harper felt something warm in her chest. It wasn't love, not yet. But it was the beginning of something, the possibility of something. "So," Matt said, signaling for the check, "when do we start rehearsing our fake love story?" "How about now?" Harper suggested, surprising herself with the boldness. Matt smiled, a genuine smile that lit up his entire face. "How did we meet?" Harper thought for a moment, her eyes sparkling. "A charity gala. You were bored. I was dragged there by a friend. Our eyes met across the room. And I couldn't stop staring," Matt continued, playing along. "You were standing near a painting, criticizing the artist's technique. You walked over and disagreed. We started debating, contemporary art versus classical. And suddenly, 3 hours had passed." They laughed, and Harper realized she hadn't laughed like this, free, light, in months, maybe years. But when Matt walked her to her taxi later that night, holding the door open as she got in, there was a moment. A second where their eyes met, and something unrehearsed passed between them. something real. And they both knew, even without admitting it, that the line between lie and truth was beginning to blur. The following weeks unfolded in a series of carefully orchestrated meetings, each supposedly dedicated to building the perfect narrative for the wedding. But something was changing, a subtle transformation neither of them was willing to name out loud. It was a Thursday evening when they met again, this time at a small French bistro on the Upper East Side. Rain drummed against the windows, creating a hypnotic rhythm that matched the low murmur of conversations around them. The smell of melted butter and fresh herbs filled the air, and candles flickered on each table, casting dancing shadows on the cream-colored walls. Harper arrived a few minutes late, her hair slightly damp from the rain, her cheeks flushed from the cold wind. Matt stood immediately, and she noticed how he watched her, not with Marcus's vacant stare, who always seemed mentally somewhere else, but with genuine attention, as if every detail mattered. "Sorry I'm late," she said, taking off her coat. "Parent-teacher conference ran long." "No problem. I ordered wine. Figured you'd need it," Matt replied, pouring her a glass of Bordeaux. Harper took a sip, savoring the warmth spreading through her body. "So what are we rehearsing today? How we first kissed?" The question came out more provocative than she'd intended, and she saw the corner of Matt's mouth curve into a half-smile. "Technically, we need to decide that," he said, resting his elbows on the table. "People will ask. They always ask." "Right." Harper felt her heart speed up slightly. "So, where was it?" Matt thought for a moment, his fingers tracing the rim of his glass. "After the gala. I walked you to your taxi. It was raining, not as much as today, but enough that you didn't have an umbrella. You offered me yours," Harper continued, entering the story as if it were real memory. "You refused. Said you'd survive. But you insisted. And when I handed you the umbrella, our hands touched." Harper felt a shiver run down her spine, as if the invented story had some power of its own. "And then?" Matt looked her in the eyes, and the intensity of that gaze made something inside her contract. "Then I asked if I could see you again, and you said yes." The silence that followed was too charged to be comfortable, but neither of them broke it immediately. The waiter arrived to take their orders, coq au vin for Harper, bœuf bourguignon for Matt, and the interruption was almost a relief. "You know," Harper said when they were alone again, "we're getting good at this. The lie is starting to sound convincing." "Maybe because it's not entirely a lie," Matt said, and there was something in his voice, a careful vulnerability, that made Harper's eyes snap up. "What do you mean?" Matt hesitated, as if weighing his words. "We've known each other less than 3 weeks, but I feel like I've known you longer. The conversations we have, they're real. The way you laugh when something surprises you, the way your eyes light up when you talk about your students. That's not an act." Harper felt her chest tighten. "Matt, I'm not saying it's love," he interrupted gently. "I'm just saying that the connection between us, it exists. And maybe that's what will make our charade work, because there's truth in it." Before Harper could respond, her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and felt her stomach turn. It was a message from Sarah, her ex-best friend, now Marcus's bridesmaid. "Hi, Harper. Marcus told me you RSVP'd and you're bringing someone. Can't wait to meet your boyfriend. How long have you been together? Tell me everything." The hypocrisy of the message, pretending interest after months of silence, made Harper feel nauseated. Matt noticed the immediate change in her expression. "What is it?" She showed him the message. Matt read silently, his jaw tensing slightly. "Sarah was your best friend?" he asked. "Was, until Marcus broke up with me. Then suddenly she was too busy to answer messages, but apparently she had enough time to become his and his new fiancé's confidant." Matt put the phone back on the table and took Harper's hand. The touch was firm, comforting. "Tell her we've been together for 2 months, that we met at a charity gala, and that you've never been happier." Harper looked at him, surprised. 2 months? Long enough to be serious, but not so long it raises questions about why they didn't know before. "And the happy part," he squeezed her hand lightly, "make it true." Harper felt her eyes burn, but this time they weren't tears of pain. It was something different. Gratitude, maybe, or the feeling of being defended by someone who actually cared. "Why are you doing all this?" she asked. her voice barely a whisper. "Because you deserve it," Matt answered simply. "You deserve someone who stands up for you, who sees your worth. And if I can be that person, even temporarily, then it's worth it." The food arrived and they ate slowly, but the conversation shifted. It became lighter, more intimate. Matt told her about a disastrous meeting where his partner had forgotten the entire presentation and he'd had to improvise. Harper laughed until tears streamed down her face, imagining the confident CEO having to make up numbers on the spot. "What about you?" Matt asked. "What was your most embarrassing moment?" Harper thought, a smile playing on her lips. "Last week, I was teaching about Van Gogh and accidentally said, 'Van Gogh-go.' The kids couldn't stop laughing. One of them even drew Van Gogh doing a go-go dance." Matt laughed, a genuine deep laugh that completely transformed his face. Harper realized with a jolt that he was handsome, not in Marcus's polished, calculated way, but in a more raw, honest way. When dessert arrived, profiteroles with hot chocolate, they shared it, and Harper noticed how Matt's fingers brushed hers when they both reached for the same pastry. It wasn't accidental. She was sure of it. "We need to decide more details," Matt said, licking chocolate from his fingers in a way that made Harper's stomach flip. "What do I love most about you? What do you love most about me?" Harper felt her face warm. "About you. Your honesty. The way you listen to me. How you don't try to change me." Matt grew serious. "About you. Your passion. The way you see beauty in small things. How you didn't give up on yourself, even when someone tried to convince you that you should." The air between them was charged now, electrically alive. Harper could hear her own heart beating, feel the heat rising up her neck. "Matt," she began, not knowing exactly what she was going to say. "I know," he interrupted softly. "I'm feeling it too. This complicates everything." "So simplifies it." Harper laughed, nervous. "How does this simplify anything?" "Because if there's something real between us, we don't have to pretend as much. We just need to be." When Matt paid the check and they walked out into the light rain still falling, he opened his umbrella and pulled her close. Harper felt his body against hers, solid, warm, safe. "You realize," she said as they walked slowly down the lit street, "that our made-up story is becoming real?" "I realize," Matt replied, looking at her. "The question is, are you scared?" Harper thought for a long moment. "Terrified. Me too. But—" Matt stopped, turning her to face him. Rain fell softly around them, the umbrella creating a small private world just for them. "But sometimes," he said, raising his hand to brush a wet strand of hair from her face, "the best things are the ones we don't plan." Harper didn't breathe, didn't move. And when Matt leaned in slightly, not enough to kiss her, but enough that the possibility hung in the air like a promise, she knew she was about to cross a line there would be no coming back from. The question was she ready? The invitation arrived on a Monday, delivered by messenger directly to Harper's apartment. It was heavy, on cream paper with embossed gold lettering, the kind of thing that screamed money and good taste in a discreet but unmistakable way. Harper held it between her fingers, feeling the expensive texture, and for a moment was transported back to the days when Marcus dragged her to events like this, places where she always felt like a badly dressed imposter. She photographed the invitation and sent it to Matt. It arrived. Suddenly, it feels very real. The response came almost immediately. "Can we meet tonight? We need to talk about logistics and about how you're feeling." They arranged to meet at a small park near Harper's apartment. It was late afternoon, the declining sun casting an orange light over the trees beginning to sprout new leaves. The air smelled like spring, damp earth, newly opened flowers, promises of renewal. Harper arrived first, sitting on a worn wooden bench, watching children play on the nearby playground. Their laughter was pure, carefree, and she felt a pang of envy for that innocence. When Matt appeared coming down the gravel path, Harper felt her heart give a little leap. He wore dark jeans and a grey sweater, the sleeves pushed up to his elbows, and there was something about the way he moved, confident but without arrogance, that made her momentarily forget why they were doing this. "Hi," he said, sitting beside her. Their knees touched and neither pulled away. "Hi." They sat in silence for a moment, just watching the park. Matt was the one who spoke first. "You're nervous." It wasn't a question, it was an observation. Harper sighed. "Completely terrified. And it's not just about the wedding, it's about everything. About you, about us. About this lie that's looking more and more like truth." Matt turned to look at her directly. "Harper, we need to talk about the elephant in the room." "Which one?" "We have several now." He smiled but grew serious quickly. "The differences between us. Social, economic. You're worried about them, aren't you?" Harper felt her face warm. "Is it that obvious? To someone who's paying attention? Yes." Matt took her hand, interlacing their fingers. "Every time I mention a restaurant or an event, I see you flinch slightly, like you're bracing yourself to not belong." The words were gentle, but they hurt with the truth they carried. "That's because I don't belong, Matt," Harper said, her voice small. "You're CEO of a tech company. I teach art to kids in a public school where half the supplies come out of my own pocket. You probably make in a month what I make in a year, maybe more." "And does that matter to you?" Matt asked, but there was no accusation in his voice, just genuine curiosity. Harper thought carefully before answering. "Not in the way you're thinking. I don't care about money itself. I care about what it represents, the expectations, the different worlds we inhabit." "Explain that to me," Matt asked, turning his body completely toward her. Harper took a deep breath, the spring air filling her lungs. "With Marcus, money was always a weapon. He paid for everything, dinners, trips, even clothes he thought I should wear to fit in at his events. And every time I accepted, I felt like I was selling a piece of myself, getting smaller, more dependent, more in debt." Matt squeezed her hand. "I'm not Marcus. I know. But the pattern is there in my head. And I'm afraid that if we let this become real, I'll start feeling inadequate again. Like I'm always trying to reach a standard I'll never meet." Matt was silent for a long moment, his thumb tracing circles on the back of Harper's hand, an absent, comforting gesture. "Can I tell you about my mother?" he said finally. Harper nodded. She was a janitor. She worked in corporate offices at night, cleaning the desks of people who never saw her, who never knew her name. "I grew up in a one-bedroom apartment in Queens, sharing the space with her and my grandmother. Money for food was tight. Clothes came from thrift stores. Vacations were an alien concept." Harper listened, surprised. This didn't match the image she'd built. "When I got to college, on a full scholarship and 3 part-time jobs, I felt exactly like you're feeling now. Inadequate. An imposter. Surrounded by people who had everything I never had and who seemed to value none of it." He paused, his eyes distant with memory. "It took me years to understand that worth doesn't come from where you were born or how much money you have. It comes from who you choose to be when no one's watching." "But you made it," Harper said softly. "You built a company. You're successful." "Yes. And you know what I discovered? That the wealthiest people I know are often the emptiest. They have money, but they don't have purpose. They don't have real connection. You," he gently turned her face so their eyes met, "have something money can't buy. You touch lives. You change futures. Those kids you teach, they'll carry your influence for the rest of their lives." Harper felt tears threaten. "Do you really believe that?" "With every cell in my body." A flock of birds took flight from a nearby tree, their wings beating in unison, creating a symphony of movement. Harper watched them, thinking about freedom, about choices, about courage. "Matt," she said, turning to him, "if we go to the wedding together, if we continue this afterward, people will judge. They'll say I'm with you for the money, that I'm a gold digger, an opportunist. Let them talk. You don't care." Matt smiled, not a happy smile, but the smile of someone who'd already fought battles Harper was still learning to face. "I learned a long time ago that I can't control what people think. I can only control who I choose to have by my side. And I choose you, Harper, not despite who you are, but exactly because of it." The silence that followed was dense, loaded with unspoken possibilities. Harper felt something shift inside her, not a complete healing of the wounds Marcus had left, but the beginning of something. A crack in the armor she'd built, letting light in. "At the wedding," Matt continued, his voice lower now, intimate, "there will be people who will look down on you, who will measure you by the clothes you wear, the car you don't have, the bank account that isn't yours. And you know what you're going to do? What? You're going to hold my hand, you're going to smile, you're going to be exactly who you are, an incredible woman who doesn't need anyone's approval, and I'll be there, by your side, reminding you of that every second. Harper felt something warm spread through her chest. It wasn't just gratitude. It was something deeper, more frightening. It was the beginning of trusting again, of believing that maybe, just maybe, she deserved to be seen, valued, loved for who she really was. What if I mess up, she asked, vulnerable. What if I say something wrong, use the wrong fork, don't know which wine they're talking about? Matt laughed softly, raising his hand to brush away a strand of hair the wind had blown across her face. The touch was gentle, familiar, full of affection. Then you'll mess up, and you know what? It won't matter, because you're not going there to impress them. You're going to prove to yourself that you survived, that you're stronger than they ever gave you credit for. What about you? Harper asked, bold now. Why are you really doing this, the complete truth? Matt looked at her for a long moment, and Harper saw something pass through his eyes, fear, hope, raw vulnerability. Because when I look at you, he said finally, his voice rough, I see someone who makes me want to be better, not richer, not more successful, just more present, more human. And it's been a long time since someone made me feel that way. The world around them seemed to have grown quieter. The children were still playing, but the sound was distant. The wind still blew, but softer. It was as if the universe was holding its breath along with them. Harper didn't think. She just leaned in and touched her lips lightly to his. It was brief, soft, more promise than complete kiss. When she pulled away, Matt's eyes were closed, as if he were savoring the moment. Sorry, Harper whispered. I just needed to. Matt opened his eyes, and what she saw there made her forget to breathe. Don't apologize, never apologize for that. They stayed there as the sun finished setting, painting the sky in oranges and pinks and purples. And when they finally stood to leave, Matt kept her hand in his, not as part of a rehearsal, but as something neither of them wanted to let go. Saturday dawned with an impeccably blue sky, as if even the weather had conspired to make Marcus's wedding perfect. Harper woke at 6 in the morning, her stomach tied in knots so tight that the idea of breakfast was impossible. She lay in bed for a long moment, staring at the ceiling of her small apartment, listening to the sounds of the city waking up. Distant honks, the scraping of store gates being opened, birds singing indifferent to the human drama below them. The navy blue dress she'd chosen after 3 frustrating attempts at different stores hung on the closet door. It was simple but elegant. 3/4 sleeves, a cut that accentuated her silhouette without being flashy, knee-length. Nothing Marcus could criticize, but also nothing that made her feel like someone she wasn't. She'd learned that lesson the hard way. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Matt. Good morning. Picking you up at 1 p.m. Breathe. You're going to kill it. And remember, I'll be there. Harper smiled despite her nerves, typing back, Thank you. Needed to hear that. See you soon. The hours until 1 o'clock dragged like cold honey. Harper took a long shower, letting the hot water relax her tense muscles. She washed her hair, dried it carefully, pulling it into an elegant low bun with a few loose strands framing her face. The makeup was subtle, light foundation, a touch of blush, mascara, rosy nude lipstick. She looked at herself in the mirror and almost didn't recognize the woman staring back. Not because of the physical transformation, but because of the determination in her eyes. You can do this, she said silently to her reflection. You survived the worst part. This is just theater. But she knew it was a lie. It wasn't theater, not anymore. At exactly 1 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Harper grabbed her small silver clutch, checked one last time that she had everything, phone, lipstick, tissues, and opened the door. Matt stood on the other side, and for a moment neither of them said anything. He wore an impeccably cut charcoal grey suit, white shirt without a tie, the top button casually open in a way that somehow made everything even more elegant. His hair was combed back, but some rebellious strands fell over his forehead. He'd shaved, but Harper could see the light shadow of stubble already appearing. And his eyes, those blue eyes she'd learned to read over the past weeks, were fixed on her with an intensity that made her momentarily forget how to breathe. "Harper," he said finally, his voice rough. "You look beautiful." She felt her face warm. "You too. I mean handsome." "You look handsome." Matt smiled, extending his hand. "Ready?" "No," she admitted, taking his hand. "But let's go anyway." The car Matt had rented for the occasion wasn't flashy. A discreet black sedan, comfortable but without ostentation. He'd explained before that he didn't want to arrive in something that seemed like a statement. "We're not there to compete," he'd said. "We're there to show that you've moved on." As they drove through the city toward the winery in the countryside, where the wedding would take place, Harper watched the streets transform from urban concrete to tree-lined roads. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, but it was loaded with anticipation. "Do you want to talk about it?" Matt asked after about 20 minutes, one hand on the wheel, the other resting near hers on the center console. "About what?" "About how you're feeling, what you're thinking." Harper looked out the window, seeing green fields stretch beneath the bright blue sky. "I'm thinking it's surreal. That 8 months ago I was planning my own wedding to Marcus, choosing flowers, tasting cakes, imagining what it would be like to walk down the aisle to him in white." She paused, swallowing the lump in her throat. "And now I'm going to watch him do all that with someone else." Matt took her hand, interlacing their fingers without taking his eyes off the road. "And part of you still hurts." "Yes, but not the way I expected." Harper turned to look at him. "It doesn't hurt because I still love him. I don't think I ever really loved him. Not the right way. It hurts because I was so easily replaceable, like our 3 years together meant nothing." "They meant something," Matt said firmly. "They taught you what you don't want, who you don't want to be. That has value." Harper squeezed his hand. "When did this turn into therapy instead of rehearsal?" "I think the first time we met, when you asked for something that seemed crazy but was just human." They drove in silence for a few more minutes before Matt spoke again. "Harper, I need to tell you something before we get there." The serious tone in his voice made her stomach clench. "What?" "Today's going to be hard. You're going to see people who hurt you, who abandoned you when you needed them. You're going to hear comments, feel stares, and at some point you might want to fall apart." He glanced quickly at her before returning his eyes to the road. "If that happens, don't fight it. Don't pretend you're okay if you're not. Just look at me, squeeze my hand, and I'll remind you of who you are." Tears burned in Harper's eyes, but she held them back. "Why are you so good to me?" "Because you deserve it," Matt answered simply. "And because the more time I spend with you, the more I realize this stopped being a favor a long time ago." Before Harper could fully process what he'd said, they turned onto a road lined with grapevines stretching as far as the eye could see. The winery was stunning. A restored property with stone buildings covered in climbing vines, meticulously maintained gardens, and in the distance, a glass structure where the ceremony would clearly take place. Matt parked and turned off the engine. For a moment, neither of them moved. "Last chance to back out," Harper said, trying to sound playful but failing. Matt turned completely toward her, taking both her hands. "Look at me." She obeyed. "You are Harper Bennett, art teacher. Someone who changes lives every day without even realizing it. Someone brave enough to ask for help when you needed it. Someone strong enough to face pain head on." He squeezed her hands. "And you're not alone. I promise." Harper took a deep breath, feeling the air fill her lungs, calming her burning nerves. "Okay, let's do this." They got out of the car and began walking toward the entrance. Harper could see other guests arriving, women in pastel dresses, men in expensive suits, all looking comfortable in this world of discreet wealth. And for a moment, that old fear hit her, the feeling of not belonging. As if sensing her hesitation, Matt stopped, gently turning her to face him. He raised his hand and lightly touched her face, his thumb tracing the line of her cheek. "You belong anywhere you choose to be," he whispered. "Remember that." And then right there at the entrance to the winery where her ex-fiancé was about to marry another woman, Matt leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't the brief, shy kiss they'd shared in the park. It was something deeper, more deliberate. A statement, a promise. When they separated, Harper saw something in his eyes that made her completely forget where she was. "What was that for?" she asked, breathless. Matt smiled, taking her hand and interlacing their fingers. "To remind you and anyone watching, that you're exactly where you should be. And with his hand firm in hers, Harper walked toward the place where her past and her future were about to collide. The ceremony would take place in a glass structure, surrounded by vineyards stretching like a green sea under the afternoon sun. White chairs were aligned in perfect rows, decorated with ivory silk bows and small bouquets of white roses and blue hydrangeas. The aroma of flowers mixed with the earthy smell of the vines and a gentle breeze that carried promises of spring. Harper and Matt found their seats, not too far forward, not too far back, strategically positioned where they'd be seen, but wouldn't be the center of attention. As they sat down, Harper felt the stares, discreet but unmistakable, heads turning, whispers being exchanged behind delicately positioned hands. She knew these people, Marcus's former colleagues, friends who had been hers too, until the breakup forced them to choose sides. "Breathe," Matt murmured beside her, so low only she could hear. His hand found hers, fingers interlacing with a familiarity that weeks ago would have been rehearsed. Now it was instinct. Sarah appeared out of nowhere, a tornado of false enthusiasm in a lavender dress that matched the flowers perfectly. Her eyes gleamed with barely disguised curiosity as she approached, her high heels sinking slightly into the grass. "Harper, you came!" Her voice was too high-pitched, too cheerful. "And this must be the famous boyfriend!" Matt stood with the natural grace of someone used to navigating complicated social situations, extending his hand with a polite but reserved smile. "Matt Donovan, pleasure to meet you." Sarah shook his hand, but her eyes scanned him, clothes, watch, posture, trying to calculate his worth. Harper knew her well enough to recognize the process. Sarah Miller, bride's best friend. She emphasized best friend in a way that made Harper feel a pang. That had been her title once. "So, Matt, what do you do?" "I work in tech," Matt replied vaguely, without elaborating. Harper noticed the tactic, give enough information to be polite, but not enough to invite interrogation. "How interesting. And how did you two meet?" Harper mentioned something about a gala. Harper opened her mouth to answer, but Matt was faster, his hand gently squeezing hers. "It was a few months ago. Charity event for arts education. Harper was criticizing one of the pieces on display, and I couldn't help but disagree." He looked at Harper with a smile that seemed incredibly genuine. "We spent 3 hours debating. When I realized it, she was the most interesting person I'd talked to in years. The way he told the story, with details they'd invented but emotion that was completely real, made Harper's heart race." Sarah clearly noticed too, her smile becoming slightly forced. "How romantic. Well, I need to get back to the preparations. See you at the reception." She hurried away, probably already planning how to report this information to Marcus. When she was out of sight, Harper let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "You were perfect," she whispered. "I just told the truth," Matt replied, and something in the way he looked at her made Harper realize he wasn't just talking about the fictional gala. The music began, a string quartet playing softly, and guests settled in. Harper felt her stomach clench when she saw Marcus appear at the altar. He was exactly as she remembered, tall, perfectly styled blonde hair, navy blue suit that probably cost more than Harper's monthly rent. Handsome in a classic, almost generic way. But when his eyes met hers for a fraction of a second, Harper didn't feel the stabbing pain she'd expected. She felt something closer to indifference, like looking at an old photograph of someone you used to know. Matt must have sensed the change in her because his hand squeezed hers more firmly. Not in warning, but in support. The bride appeared, Victoria, the corporate lawyer who had replaced Harper in record time. She was stunning, Harper had to admit. Tall, slender, lace dress that probably came from some European designer, veil flowing behind her like clouds. Everything perfectly coordinated, perfectly appropriate for Marcus's world. During the ceremony, Harper watched. She watched how Marcus looked at Victoria. With admiration, yes, but there was something calculated in it, as if she were a particularly impressive trophy. She watched how Victoria smiled, beautiful, but there was tension around her eyes, a stiffness in her shoulders. And she watched Matt, who looked at her, Harper, as if she were the only person in the world, without calculation, without performance, just truth. When the officiant said, "I now pronounce you husband and wife," and Marcus kissed his new wife, Harper waited for the stab of jealousy, the bitterness. But what she felt was liberation, as if chains she didn't even know she'd been carrying had finally broken. "Are you okay?" Matt asked quietly as they applauded along with the other guests. "I am," Harper replied, surprised to realize it was true. "I really am." The reception was in an elegant adjacent hall with high ceilings of exposed wooden beams, crystal chandeliers hanging like captured stars, and tables decorated with elaborate arrangements of roses and eucalyptus. Champagne circulated on silver trays, carried by waiters in white vests. The sound of animated conversations, controlled laughter, and silverware against fine china created a symphony of civility. Matt and Harper found their table, shared with 3 other couples Harper vaguely recognized from past events with Marcus. The introductions were polite, slightly curious. Matt navigated each conversation with ease, talking about technology when asked, but mostly asking intelligent questions to others, making them feel interesting. Harper watched him with growing admiration. He wasn't showing off. He was just being human. "So, Harper," said Rachel, a former colleague of Marcus's from the law firm, her eyes gleaming with barely disguised malice, "I heard you're still teaching art to children. How dedicated." The tone made it clear what she really thought, that it was a waste, an inferior choice. Before Harper could respond, Matt leaned slightly forward, his voice friendly but with a thread of steel. "Harper is shaping futures," he said. "She's teaching children to see beauty, to express emotion, to create something from nothing. Honestly, I think it's the most important work in the room." The silence at the table was brief, but loaded. Rachel forced a smile and quickly changed the subject. Under the table, Harper found Matt's hand and squeezed. He responded by interlacing their fingers, his thumb tracing gentle circles on the back of her hand. When dinner was served, smoked salmon appetizer, filet mignon with asparagus for the main course, panna cotta with berries for dessert, Harper could barely eat. Not from nervousness, but because she was hyper-aware of every small gesture between her and Matt. How he placed his hand on the back of her chair when he leaned in to speak, how he offered her a taste of his dish when she showed curiosity, how their knees touched under the table and neither pulled away. Marcus and Victoria made the rounds of the tables, greeting guests. When they reached Harper's table, the air became visibly more tense. "Harper," Marcus said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Thanks for coming." "Marcus, Victoria, congratulations." Harper was surprised by the firmness in her own voice. "The wedding is beautiful." Victoria murmured a polite thank you, but her eyes were on Matt, assessing, calculating. "Matt Donovan," Matt said, standing and extending his hand. "Congratulations to both of you." Marcus shook his hand, and Harper saw something pass between the two men, a recognition, a silent measuring. Marcus probably expected to find someone smaller, less impressive. Matt clearly was neither. "And how did you two meet?" Marcus asked, his curiosity barely disguised. Matt smiled, placing his hand on Harper's back in a protective, natural way. "A charity gala. We argued about art. Harper put me in my place. I was fascinated." The way he told it, with genuine affection, with respect, was so different from how Marcus used to talk about Harper, and everyone at the table noticed. "Well," Marcus said, his voice slightly tense, "I hope you enjoy the party." And he quickly walked away, Victoria on his heels. When they left, Harper let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "You just survived the worst part," Matt murmured in her ear, his warm breath against her skin making her shiver. "And you were amazing." Harper turned to look at him, their faces just inches apart. "We were amazing." "We," Matt agreed, and the word carried weight. Promise. Possibility. The band started playing, soft, inviting music. Couples began moving to the dance floor, and Matt, without saying anything, extended his hand. "Dance with me." Harper looked at the extended hand. The social obligation was already fulfilled. Marcus had seen. People had speculated. She could refuse, keep things platonic, safe. But when she looked into Matt's eyes, those blue eyes that truly saw her, She knew she didn't want safe. She wanted truth. "Yes," she said, placing her hand in his. And as he led her to the dance floor, Harper knew they were about to cross another line from which there would be no return. The dance floor was lit by soft lights, hanging like captured fireflies, casting a golden glow over the couples moving in slow rhythm. The band had switched to something more intimate, a jazz version of The Way You Look Tonight, and the air was heavy with the aroma of wine, roses, and the promise of unspoken things. Matt led Harper to the center of the floor with quiet confidence, his hand firm on her back, the other interlaced with hers. When they began to move, Harper realized with a jolt that they fit perfectly. Not in the awkward way she'd always felt with Marcus, who danced like he was fulfilling a social obligation. With Matt, it was as if their bodies already knew each other's language. "You dance well," she said, surprised. Matt smiled. That half smile she'd learned meant he was about to reveal something true. "My mother taught me. She said a man who knew how to lead a woman in a dance knew how to respect her space while keeping her close. Balance. Wise woman." She was. The sadness in the past tense didn't go unnoticed, but before Harper could ask, Matt spun her gently, pulling her back closer than before. "You dance well, too. Where did you learn?" "Mandatory classes in high school. Hated every minute." Harper laughed, the sound surprisingly light. "I was always the tall, awkward girl stepping on my partner's feet. You're not stepping on mine. Because you're paying attention to me." Matt stopped moving for a fraction of a second, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made the air between them thicker. "I always pay attention to you, Harper. Since day one." Her heart raced. Around them, other couples were dancing, Marcus and Victoria included, she noticed peripherally, but it was as if they existed in a separate bubble, a world where only the two of them mattered. "Matt," Harper began, her voice hesitant, "we don't have to keep doing this. The charade. We've already fulfilled our obligation. People saw, Marcus saw, you don't need to—" "It's not because I need to," Matt interrupted, his voice low but firm. He leaned his head in, his lips close to her ear, his warm breath against her skin. "It's because I want to." Harper felt something contract inside her chest, part fear, part hope, part pure desire. "Want what, exactly?" Matt pulled back, just enough to look into her eyes. The hand holding her waist moved slightly, his fingers tracing a subtle line along the side of her dress, making her shiver. "I want to dance with you because I like how you feel in my arms. I want to be here because when I'm with you, everything else disappears. I want to stop pretending this is just theater." The words hung between them, raw and honest and completely terrifying. Harper knew she should say something, but her throat was closed, conflicting emotions fighting inside her. "You're scared," Matt observed, not as an accusation but as fact. "Terrified," Harper admitted. "Because this—" She made a vague gesture between them. "This felt safe when it was pretend. Now it feels dangerous. Because it's real." "Yes." Matt nodded slowly as if processing, deciding something important. "Can I be completely honest with you? Please. I'm terrified too, because it's been 3 years since I felt something like this, and the last time I risked my heart it was shattered. And you—" He paused, his fingers squeezing her hand lightly. "You have the power to destroy me in a way no one else has since then." Harper felt tears burn, but didn't let them fall. "Not here. Not now." "Then why risk it?" "Because some things are worth the risk, and you, Harper Bennett, definitely are one of them." The music changed, something even slower, more intimate. Other couples left the floor, but Matt and Harper remained, moving to a rhythm that was theirs alone. He pulled her closer, eliminating any space between their bodies, and Harper allowed it, resting her head lightly on his shoulder. She could feel his heart beating against hers, could feel the warmth of his body through their clothes, could feel his fingers tracing absent patterns on her back. "I won't hurt you on purpose," she whispered against the fabric of his suit. "I know, and I won't hurt you on purpose either. But we could hurt each other, accidentally." "Yes, that's the risk." Matt pulled back just enough to raise his hand and touch her face, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. "But I think it would be worse to never try, to spend the rest of my life wondering, what if?" Harper closed her eyes, leaning slightly into his touch. When did this stop being about Marcus and become about us? For me, probably at the cafe when you were brave enough to ask for help. For you, Harper opened her eyes, meeting his. At dinner, when you saw me, really saw me, in a way Marcus never did. They were barely moving now, just swaying gently as the music continued. Around them, Harper was vaguely aware of stares, Sarah watching with barely disguised curiosity, Marcus glancing over while dancing with Victoria, other guests murmuring. But for the first time in months, she didn't care. Let them look. Let them speculate. Matt, she said, deciding to be brave, what happens when this night is over? When there's no more charade to maintain? Matt stopped moving completely, keeping her close as he looked into her eyes with an intensity that made her forget how to breathe. Then we start something new, something real, no scripts, no rehearsals, just the two of us figuring out if this connection we feel can turn into something more. What if it doesn't work out? What if it does? Harper felt a smile tug at her lips despite her nerves. Do you always answer questions with questions? Only when the person asking already knows the answer but is afraid to admit it. She laughed, the sound lighter than she'd felt in months. You know me too well for someone I met only 3 weeks ago. Or maybe I just pay attention to the right things. The music was ending, the final notes floating in the air like sighs. Matt leaned his forehead against hers, his eyes closed, breathing, mingling with hers. Harper, when we leave here today, when this night is over, and there's no more Marcus or Victoria or this whole charade, would you see me again? For us? For real? It was the question she'd been avoiding asking herself, the answer she was afraid to confront. Because saying yes meant risking again. It meant opening her heart to the possibility of being hurt again. But when she looked at Matt, at the man who had shown up when she needed him, who had defended her, who truly saw her, she knew the answer had never really been in doubt. Yes, she whispered. I thought you'd never ask. The smile that lit up Matt's face was so genuine, so full of relief and joy, that Harper felt something finally loosen inside her. It wasn't the complete healing of all the wounds Marcus had left, but it was the beginning of something new, something that could be beautiful if she was brave enough to let it. Matt leaned in, his forehead still against hers, lips almost touching. Can I kiss you? For real this time, not for performance, just because I want to. Yes, Harper breathed. And there, in the middle of the dance floor at her ex-fiancé's wedding, surrounded by people who once judged her as not enough, Harper Bennett finally found what she'd been looking for, without even knowing it. When Matt's lips met hers, it was different from the kiss at the entrance or the brief touch in the park. It was deep, slow, loaded with promise and possibility. His hands found their way to her hair, gently undoing the careful bun, letting the strands fall. Her hands clutched at the fabric of his suit, pulling him closer. The world around them disappeared. The music, the guests, Marcus, everything. There was only this moment, this kiss, this truth that neither of them could deny anymore. When they finally separated, both breathless, Matt rested his forehead against hers again, a smile playing on his lips. Definitely real, he murmured. Definitely, Harper agreed, laughing softly. And for the first time since Marcus had broken her heart, Harper Bennett felt something she was sure she'd never feel again. Hope. But what neither of them realized yet was that the night was far from over, and that the deepest truths were still to come. The night progressed in a blur of golden champagne, soft laughter, and stolen glances. Harper and Matt had returned to the table, but the atmosphere between them had changed completely. There was no more pretense, no more rehearsal. Every touch was intentional, every look loaded with meaning that didn't need words. Harper observed the hall with different eyes now. She saw Marcus and Victoria cutting the cake, a perfectly choreographed moment, practiced smiles for the cameras. She saw guests applauding at all the appropriate moments, toasting at the right intervals, performing the social ritual of a wedding with mechanical precision. And she realized, with a clarity that surprised her, that this had never been what she really wanted. Penny for your thoughts, Matt said quietly beside her, his hand resting casually over hers on the table. Harper turned to look at him, studying the planes of his face illuminated by the soft candlelight. I was thinking it never would have worked. With Marcus, I mean. No? She shook her head slowly. I thought I loved him, but I think what I really loved was the idea of belonging somewhere, of being chosen, of being enough for someone like him. Harper laughed without humor. Pretty stupid, right? It's not stupid, Matt said, turning her hand over and interlacing their fingers. It's human. We all want to be seen, valued. But I was trying to fit into a mold that was never made for me, and I lost myself in the process. Harper looked around the hall again, the elaborate flowers, the expensive decor, the impeccable performance. Look at this. It's beautiful, yes, but it's so empty. There's nothing real here, no imperfection, no vulnerability. Matt followed her gaze, watching Marcus and Victoria pose for more photos, their smiles bright but not reaching their eyes. You're right. It's too perfect. Like a movie set. Exactly. And I would have been just another prop in that set. The appropriate wife. The decorative piece that completed his image of success. Harper felt something loosen in her chest as she spoke these words aloud, finally naming what she'd always felt but could never articulate. He never really wanted me. He just wanted the idea of me that he'd created. Matt squeezed her hand, bringing her back to the present moment. And now? What do you want? Harper turned completely toward him, their knees touching under the table. The question was simple, but the answer was too complex to be contained in a few words, so she decided to be completely honest. I want to be seen, not the edited and improved version, but the real person. I want someone who values my work, not despite being just teaching art, but because they understand it's important. I want conversations that last for hours and comfortable silences. I want... She paused, taking a deep breath. I want what I feel when I'm with you. Matt's eyes softened, and he raised his free hand to touch her face, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. You have that, Harper. You've had it from the start. I see you, all of you, and there's not a single part I want to change. The tears finally came, silent but relentless, sliding down Harper's cheeks. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were of liberation, of mourning something she finally understood she never had, and of gratitude for what was beginning to build. Hey, Matt whispered, wiping the tears away with his thumbs. Are you okay? I'm more than okay, Harper replied, laughing through her tears. For the first time in years, I'm exactly where I should be. Around them, the party continued. The band played another song, waiters circulated with trays of champagne, guests laughed and chatted. Sarah passed by them at some point, clearly curious about the intimate moment she'd witnessed, but Matt simply waved politely without letting go of Harper. Want to get out of here? Matt asked after a moment, his voice low, intimate. We've already fulfilled our obligation. We showed Marcus and everyone else that you survived, that you thrived. We don't need to stay for the rest. Harper considered. Part of her, the part that still carried a bit of that insecure girl Marcus had shaped, wanted to stay, wanted to make sure everyone saw that they understood she was fine. But the stronger part, the part that was finally learning to trust herself, knew she didn't need their validation. Yes, she said, picking up her clutch. Let's go. They stood up discreetly, navigating through the tables toward the exit. But before they could reach the door, a voice stopped them. Harper? A moment? It was Marcus, alone holding a champagne flute, looking slightly uncomfortable for the first time all evening. Victoria was on the other side of the hall, surrounded by a group of guests. Harper felt Matt tense beside her, but she squeezed his hand reassuringly. It's okay, she murmured to him, before turning to Marcus. Yes? Marcus looked between her and Matt, clearly weighing his words. I just wanted to say, you seem happy. Really happy. The observation surprised her. I am. Happy. It's good to see. Marcus took a sip of champagne, avoiding eye contact. And I'm sorry for how things ended. For how I'm sorry. Harper studied the man in front of her, the man she thought she'd never recover from losing, and felt only a mild melancholy. Not anger, not hurt, just the soft sadness of wasted potential. I'm sorry too, she said honestly. "I'm sorry that neither of us was brave enough to admit we weren't right for each other before so much time passed." Marcus finally looked at her, and for the first time she saw something genuine in his eyes. Regret, perhaps, or recognition. "You deserve better than what I gave you, Harper. You always did." "I know," Harper replied simply, without malice, because she knew now. Finally believed it. Marcus nodded, glancing briefly at Matt. "Take care of her." "Always," Matt replied, his voice firm, a promise. And then Marcus walked away, returning to his perfect wedding with his perfect bride in his perfectly curated life. And Harper realized she didn't feel envious, not even a little. "Are you okay?" Matt asked as they continued toward the exit. "Yes," Harper replied, surprised at how true it was. "I think I finally found closure. Not the way I expected, but yes." The night air was cool when they stepped outside, a gentle breeze carrying the smell of vines and wet earth. The sky was clear, stars dotting the darkness like scattered diamonds. Harper breathed deeply, filling her lungs with clean air, feeling something old being expelled and something new taking its place. Matt pulled her close, his arm around her shoulders, and they walked slowly toward the car. But before reaching it, Harper stopped, turning to face him under the silvery moonlight. "Matt, I need to tell you something. Anything. I was wrong. About what I said before. About never really loving Marcus." She placed her hands on his chest, feeling his heart beating steadily beneath her palms. "I loved the idea of belonging, the security of being chosen. But that wasn't love, not really. And now for the first time I think I understand the difference." Matt covered her hands with his eyes gleaming in the darkness. "And what's the difference? True love doesn't ask you to be smaller. It doesn't demand that you fit into a mold. It's—" Harper searched for the right words. "It's when someone sees you completely, all the imperfections, all the vulnerabilities, and chooses you anyway. Not despite who you are, but because of it." "Harper, let me finish," she interrupted gently. "I don't know what this is yet between us. I know it's new, I know it's scary, but I know that when I'm with you I feel like I can breathe for the first time in years, and that has to mean something." Matt was quiet for a long moment, just looking at her with those eyes that truly saw her. Then he smiled, not the careful half-smile, but a full, genuine smile that completely transformed his face. "It means everything," he said, "and I know exactly what this is between us." "You do?" "It's the beginning," Matt replied, leaning in to kiss her softly. "It's the first page of something that could be extraordinary if we're brave enough to let it be." Harper leaned into the kiss, into his words, into him, and when they separated she whispered against his lips, "Then let's be brave." They stood there for another moment under the stars, two wounded hearts that had found healing in each other, and when they finally got into the car to begin the long drive back to the city, Harper knew she wasn't just leaving a wedding behind. She was leaving behind the person she used to be, the insecure person who needed Marcus's validation. And she was driving towards something new, something real, something that was worth every second of risk. But the night wasn't over yet, and the deepest truths, those that would change everything, were still waiting to be revealed. The drive back to the city was wrapped in a silence charged with anticipation. The highway lights passed in rhythmic flashes, casting patterns of light and shadow inside the car. Harper watched out the window, seeing the rural landscape gradually give way to suburbs, and then to Manhattan's concrete jungle, but her mind was somewhere else entirely. She was aware of every small detail. Matt's hand resting on the gear shift, occasionally brushing her thigh when he changed gears. The way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't paying attention, the sound of his breathing, steady and reassuring in the car's enclosed space. "What are you thinking about?" Matt finally asked, breaking the comfortable silence. Harper turned to look at him, studying his profile illuminated by the headlights of passing cars. "I'm thinking that I don't want this night to end." Matt glanced briefly at her before returning his eyes to the road. "It doesn't have to." Harper's heart raced. "What do you mean?" Instead of answering immediately, Matt made a decision. At the next exit, he left the highway, navigating the city streets until he stopped in front of a discreet boutique hotel in Lower Manhattan. The building was elegant, but not ostentatious, with a brick facade and arched windows emanating warm light. Matt turned off the engine and turned completely toward Harper, his eyes serious but kind. "I don't want to pressure you. I don't want you to feel like you need anything, but I also don't want to pretend I don't feel what I feel. So I'm going to be completely honest." He took her hand, interlacing their fingers. "I want more time with you, more conversation, more of this connection I can't explain but know is real. If you just want to talk, just be together, that's perfect. But if you want more—" He left the sentence unfinished, leaving the choice completely with her. Harper felt something warm in her chest, not just desire, though there was certainly that, but deep gratitude for this kindness, for this respect Matt always showed. "I want more," Harper said, her voice firm despite her nerves. "I want you, Matt, completely." The relief that passed over Matt's face was palpable. He brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles before getting out of the car and opening the door for her. The night breeze was cold, but Harper barely noticed as Matt guided her into the hotel lobby. Check-in was quick, discreet. The receptionist handed over the room key without questions, and soon they were in an old elevator with gold mirrors and deep red carpet. Matt kept his hand on Harper's back, not possessive but comforting, as if ensuring she was okay with every step of this journey. The room was beautiful in an intimate way. Cream-toned walls, a king-size bed with impeccable white sheets, tall windows with a view of the city lights twinkling like giant fireflies. A bottle of wine already waited in an ice bucket, courtesy of the hotel, and soft music played from hidden speakers. When the door closed behind them, the weight of the moment hung in the air. Harper felt the nerves return, not because she was afraid of Matt, but because this meant something. It was more than physical. It was emotional. It was real. Matt must have sensed her hesitation because he didn't approach immediately. Instead, he went to the wine, pouring 2 glasses and bringing one to her. "To courage," he said with a half-smile. Harper accepted the glass, taking a sip of the cold liquid. "You're nervous too?" "Terrified," Matt admitted, setting his glass aside and approaching her slowly, giving her time to back away if she wanted. "Because this matters. You matter." Harper placed her own glass beside his and closed the distance between them, placing her hands on his chest. She could feel his heart beating rapidly beneath her palms, proof that he was as affected as she was. "Matt," she whispered, "stop giving me exit options. I chose this. I chose you." Something shifted in his eyes, the last hesitation dissolving, giving way to something deeper, more intense. He raised his hands to frame her face, thumbs tracing her cheekbones as he leaned in slowly. The kiss began gentle, exploratory, but quickly deepened. Harper's hands found their way to his hair, fingers sliding through the soft strands as she pulled him closer. Matt's arms wrapped around her, one hand sliding down her back, the other getting lost in her hair, completely undoing what remained of her careful hairstyle. They moved together toward the bed, hands exploring with growing urgency, but still with tenderness. Matt slowly unbuttoned Harper's dress, his fingers hesitating at each button as if savoring the moment. The fabric slipped from her shoulders, falling in a whisper of silk to the floor. Harper felt vulnerable, standing there in just simple lingerie under Matt's intense gaze. But when she looked at him, what she saw wasn't judgment. It was reverence. "You're beautiful," he murmured, his voice rough with emotion. "Completely beautiful." Harper's hands went to the buttons of his shirt, fingers trembling slightly as she opened it. When she finally slid the fabric off his broad shoulders, revealing warm skin and defined muscles, she traced the lines of his chest with her fingertips, feeling him shiver under her touch. Matt pulled her to the bed, both falling onto the soft sheets. The outside world disappeared completely. The city lights, the distant traffic, everything. There was only them, only this moment of complete surrender. His hands explored with reverence, tracing the curve of her waist, the contour of her hips, each touch sending waves of heat through her body. Harper arched toward him, her own hands exploring the muscles of his back, feeling them tense under her palms. When Matt finally slid inside her, they both stopped, breaths intertwined, foreheads pressed together. It wasn't just physical. It was recognition. It was 2 wounded souls finding healing in each other. It was vulnerability and strength and promise all woven together. They moved together in a rhythm that was theirs, not rushed, but deliberate. Each movement, each touch, each stolen kiss was a silent communication of things words couldn't yet express. Harper felt tears slide down her temples, not from sadness, but from total liberation, from finally allowing herself to feel completely, love completely, be completely seen and accepted. Matt kissed the tears away, his own emotions clear in his glistening eyes. "I'm here," he whispered against her skin. "Completely here. Completely yours." When they finally reached climax together, it was with eyes open, looking at each other, refusing to break the connection even in the most intense moment. And when the world slowly came back into focus, they remained intertwined, neither wanting to let go, neither wanting the moment to end. Matt pulled her against his chest, arms wrapping around her protectively as their heartbeats gradually slowed. Harper rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm, feeling his warmth envelope her like a blanket. "Harper," Matt said after a long moment of comfortable silence, his voice rough but firm. "Yes? This wasn't just sex for me. I need you to know that." Harper propped herself up on one elbow to look at him, seeing the raw vulnerability in his eyes. "I know. It wasn't for me either. It was real," Harper finished for him. "Completely real." Matt smiled, pulling her back to his chest. "So what do we do now?" Harper thought for a moment, her fingers tracing lazy patterns on his chest. "Now we stop pretending. We stop rehearsing and we just—" "Ah, Matt repeated, as if testing the sound. "I like that." They lay in silence for a few more minutes, just existing together in the room's soft glow. Then Harper laughed softly. "What?" Matt asked. "I'm just thinking. I came to that wedding to prove I'd survived Marcus, that I was fine without him. And I discovered I didn't just survive. I thrived, because I found something I never had with him, something real, something worth every risk." Matt gently turned her so he could look at her face. "You found me, and I found you. And I think we both found something we didn't even know we were looking for." "What's that?" "Home," Matt said simply. "Not a place. A person. Someone who sees us completely and loves us anyway." The tears returned, but Harper let them flow freely now. "I love you," she whispered, the words coming out before she could think, but knowing they were true. "I know it's early. I know it's scary, but I love you, Matt." The smile that lit up Matt's face was like sunrise, slow, warm, transformative. "I love you too, Harper. I think I've loved you since that first day at the cafe when you were brave enough to ask for help. And every day since then has only made that love grow." They kissed again, but this time it was different. It wasn't urgency or desire. It was promise. It was commitment. It was the beginning of something they both knew could last a lifetime if they were brave enough to let it. And as the city continued pulsing outside the window, indifferent to the human drama unfolding in a hotel room, Harper and Matt intertwined again, this time without hurry, savoring each touch, each kiss, each moment together, because they'd found something rare, something precious, something worth every risk, every fear, every vulnerability. They'd found true love, and this time, neither was willing to let it slip away. 6 months later, Harper's life had transformed in ways she never could have imagined that nervous morning before Marcus's wedding. Not in dramatic or cinematic ways, but in the small things that really mattered, in the quiet details that made up a shared life. It was an autumn afternoon, the crisp air carrying the smell of dry leaves and the promise of winter approaching. Harper stood in the school art room, surrounded by her students' colorful work, hanging like victory flags on improvised clotheslines. Paintings of families, abstract animals, imaginary landscapes, each one a small universe of childhood creativity. Matt was at the back of the room, watching her interact with the parents who had come for the annual art exhibition. He'd cancelled 2 important meetings to be there, and when Harper protested, he simply smiled and said, "There's nothing more important than seeing you shine." She caught him looking now, their eyes meeting across the crowded room. He was leaning against the wall, hands in his jeans pockets, wearing a simple grey sweater that somehow made him look younger, more relaxed. And the smile he gave her, that smile that was hers alone, made her heart race the same way it had since that first kiss under the stars. "Miss Bennet," said a small voice beside her. Harper looked down to see Emily, one of her 8-year-old students, gently tugging her sleeve. "Is that your boyfriend?" Harper laughed, crouching down to the girl's height. "Yes, that's him. He's handsome," Emily whispered, loud enough for Matt to hear. He laughed from across the room. "He is," Harper agreed, feeling her face warm. "Are you going to marry him?" Emily asked with the unfiltered frankness of children. The question caught her off guard, but when Harper looked at Matt again, seeing him now chatting animatedly with one of the parents about educational technology, she realized the answer was simpler than expected. "Maybe someday," she said honestly. "If he asks me." Emily smiled broadly, as if Harper had just revealed the world's greatest secret, and ran off to show her painting to someone else. When the event finally ended and the last parents left with their children, Matt helped Harper clean up the room. They worked in comfortable silence, he organizing chairs while she collected disposable juice cups and put away art supplies. "You were amazing today," Matt said, breaking the silence. "The way you talk to each child, how you make each one feel special, it's a gift." Harper stopped what she was doing and looked at him. "You really believe that, don't you? You're not just being nice." "I believe it with every fiber of my being," Matt replied, approaching her. "And it drives me crazy that you still doubt it sometimes." "Old habits," Harper admitted. "Marcus spent so much time making me feel this was insignificant that sometimes I still hear his voice in my head." Matt framed her face with his hands, forcing her to look into his eyes. "Then let me replace that voice. You are extraordinary, Harper Bennett. The work you do matters, the lives you touch matter, and anyone who can't see that is a complete idiot." Harper laughed despite the tears threatening. "Including your ex-fiancé." "Especially my ex-fiancé," Matt corrected with a smile. "Who, by the way, is apparently having marital problems from what I heard." Harper raised an eyebrow. "How do you know that?" "Sarah added me on LinkedIn and won't stop commenting on my posts. Apparently Victoria found some messages between Marcus and a junior associate at his firm." "Really?" Harper felt a twinge of something, not exactly satisfaction, but maybe validation. "He's cheating on her?" "Looks like it. Ironic, isn't it? The man who accused you of not being enough can't be faithful to the perfect woman he married." Harper thought about that for a moment, expecting to feel some malicious joy. But all she felt was mild sadness. It's sad, actually. He'll never find what he's looking for because he doesn't even know what it is. Matt pulled her into a hug, kissing the top of her head. "And that's why I love you, because even after everything he did to you, you still have compassion." They stood there for a long moment, just holding each other in the middle of the empty art room, surrounded by children's colorful dreams. And Harper realized that this simplicity, this peace, this feeling of home, was everything she'd always wanted. "Matt," she said against his chest, "where do you see this going? Us, I mean." He pulled back enough to look at her, a serious but hopeful expression on his face. "Honestly, I see everything. I see mornings waking up next to you. I see dinners where you tell me about your students and I complain about boring meetings. I see trips, adventures, comfortable silences." He paused, taking a deep breath. "I see marriage, Harper. Kids, if you want them. A life built together, not in mansions or perfect sets, but in real moments. In real love." Harper's heart was beating so hard she was sure he could hear it. "You want to marry me?" Matt smiled. "Eventually, yes. When the moment is right. When you're ready. But I have no doubts about where this is going." "Neither do I," Harper whispered, "and I think I'm ready now." A year later, on a golden autumn afternoon, Harper stood in a small room at the same winery where she'd watched Marcus get married. But this time, she was the bride. This time it was her story. The dress she chose was simple, delicate lace, a cut that hugged her curves without being flashy, a length that allowed her to move freely. No ostentation, just her, in the best possible way. Sarah, surprisingly, had tried to reconnect a few months ago, apologizing for disappearing. Harper had accepted the apology, but kept a respectful distance. Some friendships, when broken, never returned to what they were. And that was okay. Who was beside her now, helping pin the simple veil in her hair worn loose in natural waves, was Jessica, her best friend from college, whom Harper had let drift away during the years with Marcus. But when Harper called to say she was getting married, Jessica had cried with joy and immediately booked a flight. "You're radiant," Jessica said, her eyes shining with happy tears. "And more importantly, you look like you, not an edited version. Just you." Harper looked in the mirror and had to agree. The woman looking back had confidence in her eyes, a genuine smile on her lips, and a lightness that had been absent for so long she'd almost forgotten how it felt. "I'm ready," she said, picking up the small bouquet of white ranunculus and eucalyptus. The ceremony was outdoors, under the same grapevines where she'd danced with Matt for the first time as something more than a charade. But the setup was completely different, less formal, more intimate. Only 50 guests, mostly close friends and family. String lights hung between the vines, creating a canopy of small suns. Live guitar music floating in the afternoon air. When Harper began walking down the simple grass aisle, she didn't look for the guests' approval. She looked only for Matt. And there he was, at the end of the aisle, wearing a grey suit that perfectly matched his eyes. No tie, the top button open, completely him. And when their eyes met, she saw tears slide down his cheeks, tears he didn't try to hide. When she finally reached him, Matt took her hands, bringing them to his lips before whispering just for her, "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." "You too," Harper whispered back. The officiant, a friend of Matt's from college, spoke about love, about courage, about choosing each other every day, but Harper barely heard. She was too busy memorizing this moment. The feeling of Matt's hands in hers, the smell of autumn in the air, the sound of guests' soft laughter, the golden light filtering through the leaves. When it was time for vows, Matt went first. "Harper," he began, his voice emotional but steady, "you taught me that true love isn't about perfection. It's about seeing someone completely, all the vulnerabilities, all the fears, all the imperfections, and choosing to love them not despite that, but because of it. You taught me to be present, to be vulnerable, to risk my heart again. And I promise to spend the rest of my life showing you every day that you are seen, valued, and deeply loved." Harper was crying openly now, not caring that her makeup was probably ruined. "Matt," she began when it was her turn, "a year ago I made an insane request to a stranger. I asked you to pretend to love me to save my pride, and you said yes. But along the way, something changed. The pretense became real, and I discovered that what I was looking for, belonging worth true love, was there all along, hidden in a cafe in Greenwich Village, waiting for me to be brave enough to ask. I promise to choose you every day. I promise to see you completely. And I promise never to forget that the biggest risk I ever took was also the best decision I ever made." There wasn't a dry eye among the guests when they exchanged rings, simple gold bands symbolizing simple but profound promises. And when the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," Matt pulled her into a kiss that was pure joy, pure promise, pure love. During the reception, as they danced their first dance as husband and wife under the twinkling lights, Matt whispered in her ear, "You know, we should thank Marcus." Harper pulled back, confused. "Why?" "For being dumb enough to lose you." Matt smiled, that smile that was hers alone, and generous enough to give us this beginning. Harper laughed, a genuine, free, complete laugh. "I think you're right. Sometimes the biggest blessings come disguised as the worst moments. And sometimes," Matt said, spinning her gently, "the love we're looking for finds us exactly when we stop pretending and start being true." They danced late into that night, surrounded by people who genuinely loved them, in a place that witnessed both the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. And when they finally left under a shower of rose petals, driving toward their new life together, Harper looked back one last time, not with longing, not with regret, but with gratitude. Because that wedding, Marcus's, and had been the catalyst, the spark that started a chain of events that led her here, to Matt, to true love, to home. And as they drove to their honeymoon in a simple but perfect place they chose together, Harper finally understood the lesson that took a lifetime to learn, Sometimes you need to lose everything you thought you wanted to find everything you really need. And sometimes, the courage to ask a stranger for help in a cafe can completely change the course of your life. Because in the end, true love isn't about grand gestures or perfect weddings. It's about finding someone who sees you completely and loves you anyway. It's about being brave enough to risk again. And it's about understanding that you were always enough. You were just looking to the wrong person to confirm it. Harper Bennett had finally found her home. Not in a place, but in a heart that beat in perfect sync with hers. Sometimes the most beautiful stories begin in the most unlikely moments. Harper walked into that cafe looking for a charade to save her pride, but found something no script could have predicted. A love that didn't require her to be smaller, that didn't ask for perfection, only authenticity. Matt didn't save her. He simply saw her, and in that seeing, Harper found the courage to save herself. Because true love isn't about filling voids or healing others' wounds. It's about two whole hearts choosing to build something together. It's about having the courage to risk after being broken. It's about understanding that you were always enough. You were just looking for validation from the wrong person. And maybe the greatest lesson is this: sometimes, losing what we thought we wanted is exactly what we need to find what we truly deserve. Have you ever had the courage to ask for help when you needed it most? To risk your heart again after it's been broken? If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and become a member for early access to upcoming stories. And if you felt it was really worth listening to, also click the super thanks button. Your support makes all the difference and helps us keep bringing stories that move you. Comment below where you're listening from. We'd love to know where our story reached today.